Well, that's great. I mean, the fact that any city could do solar app, and I think there's a lot of questions I have. I mean, I'm thinking from a perspective of making sure the solar's installed correctly. Geoff, I kind of was curious, like, how does your jurisdiction handle that in particular? Because I think some jurisdictions might be weary of wanting to do solar app. And I think that question is a similar question could be asked to, Tom for CodeCycle, although the context is a little different. How do we verify that things are done correctly? I think it sounds like on Tom's side, it's more of a technical, like, hey, the program, make sure it's good to go. But on the solar app, it's like, hey, you're just agreeing to do certain things. And I'm maybe I'll start with Geoff on that, and then
Right.
yeah.
So the initial thought is that it's some kind of algorithm program that's working in the background, and the conversations I've had with people, it's really not like that. That's why I say calling it an app is kind of it sounds trendy. It sounds like just check a couple of boxes and you're good to go. But in reality, the contractors have to enter all that technical information into the app to get a successful conclusion of getting the permit issued. So if they don't enter all of that in correctly, then it won't issue the permit. It will just tell them, it'll actually give them code sections that it doesn't comply with. And so basically, if you enter them all incorrectly, it's basically saying to the contractor, yeah, if you're going to do all of the things that you've just said, or you just entered in, and you're going to do all of that at that location, because it is location specific, then that will be successful. And so that every single solar app permit that is issued is a successful permit, and it has all that technical information in there for the inspectors when they get out there in the field.
Great. And for CodeCycle, like, how do you know you're good to go? Like, I know that's this complicated process. How does the city like Concord, Christopher Harris, like, how do you like, hey, I'm good using their platform? What's the process? What did you guys have to do learning wise to get comfortable with being okay with the kind of the CodeCycle process, and what you've learned?
Well, CodeCycle came in and gave us some demonstrations to familiarize ourselves with the app, and we've kind of been evolving the process for multiple reasons. One, we've gone to all electronic plan review here in the city, but the overall gist of it is a lot of the onus of this falls on the designers to start the process with CodeCycle, and we condition our commercial projects that unless they have approval from CodeCycle, that they're not getting a permit. So it's just a pre-issuance condition, and they can submit something to us, and if there's items that are wrong on the the lighting forms, they would be caught with CodeCycle up front, and they would be resubmitting those sheets to us. But CodeCycle has such a quick turnaround on it with how quickly they review it and how quick we get to review our commercial projects in-house, that they're usually in front of us, and those mistakes are already picked up on the drawings. And when we are looking at them, they're already, have been corrected. So it's really minimal plan check that comes through the city. It's typically that plan check's going through CodeCycle. And then we're spot checking stuff. But how we got comfortable with is, of course, we've, when we started with this, we're still looking at all the forms and so forth as well. So it's not that we just stopped doing our plan check. We still have done plan check, and just more and more relied on the app to catch things. And that's how we've proceeded.
Maybe I should fill in a little bit, Damien. So our initial rollout with cities is that they asked the designers to send us plans, and so most of the projects that we see were done by some other piece of software, Energy Pro, the dynamic forms, whatever. And when we found problems on the drawings and the forms, the CodeCycle tool would point that out, and that would become the plan checklist for the city. We'd send it back to them, and they would include that with their plan review. As more designers start to use the CodeCycle tool, and most of the designers that are using the tool will tell us this is so much faster, and the fact that I'm actually looking at my plans while I'm doing it, it's very helpful because it's room specific. And then, as I noted, they cannot print the forms until everything on the project complies. So that's very helpful for jurisdictions now. You know, when they see a form that says CodeCycle, they know that it's been through our tool and that we're doing the quality review of it as well. And then at that point, they can, if they have time, they can use the inspection app that I showed you. And they can walk through as well, both the plan checker and the field inspector. So now, you know, starting out, we asked building departments to tell the designers, send us a plan. And, you know, as more designers start using the tool, the process becomes the plan, the project just goes into the CodeCycle app. And when Chris sees that the forms say CodeCycle, he can just open his app and the project is there, and he can spend a couple of minutes and look at a couple of rooms and, you know, feel good that, okay, these pieces that I looked at look good. And in the field, the inspector, he doesn't have to just look at the rooms that we've suggested. He can, if he's in a room already, he can just open up the questions for that room.
Great. Wow.
And Tom, when you were doing the demo, you showed several questions that the tool brought up for the inspector.
Yes.
What determines which questions the tool asks of the inspector?
So we have some algorithms behind the scenes that look at what one is going to save the most energy. It's the most important thing for them to look at, and we prioritize that. And when the standards change, for example, when the 2019 standards came out, CodeCycle was there day one. And so we also try to prioritize something that might be new in the standards. For example, specific rooms need vacancy sensors or partial off occupant sensors. And so those questions will tend to come up more. And then we also have some randomness so that the contractors don't get in a groove of knowing, oh, they always look for this. So there's kind of a bit of randomness and then some algorithms behind the scenes.
I had a question for Geoff. You said this extraordinarily well in our preparation, and I just want to give you a chance to kind of bring it back. So Damien was asking you about how it's possible that software could really serve the purpose of, or substantially serve the purpose of, plan review. And you know, what is the relationship between the information that's collected on a drawing and the information that's collected by the solar app via the questions and answers?
Right. So, so like I say, I've been working on this for on and off for 2 years, and so during that time, I was waiting for the time when they tell me where the secret button was that would let me see the plan, because as an electrician, it's like I really want to see the plan. I totally do. So I totally get it when people start, I've had conversations with several people where they go back to, well, where's the plan? And I was doing it myself. So, I had to let it go at some point and say, and use that analogy of, well, if I am looking at the plan, what am I doing? I'm looking at the plan. I'm asking myself questions, and I'm looking and I'm verifying that what it is actually there on the plan. And so it's taking that scenario and putting it into an electronic format. So basically taking my brain and putting it into this program, and the program taking over, and now there's no plan. So it just kind of, once you kind of let that go a little bit, and there was some pain with that personally, because I want to see the plan. But I will tell you, not having a plan, when our inspectors here in Pleasant Hill, when they went out to do the inspections, I sent them out with not any advance warning, just to say, this is a different system, and let me know what you think. And so they came back and they said, yeah, it took about the same amount of time. Was a little different, but they didn't have any problem with the inspection.
So in effect, you're collecting the same data you'd observe
Yeah.
on the plans, but
Right.
as structured question answer.
Right.
And then that serves as a record for that you get to hold the installer to if they don't
right.
perform work that matches the plans.
Yeah.
Or matches
So
what's the middle.
absolutely. So there was, that large group of people that have worked on this between, I mean, they had structural committees, they had electrical committees, and they had, all those outside agencies and all working on it all together to verify that when you input this, that this will actually, hold up, and this will be the approved, parts and pieces of the quote plan. So it's just a little bit different way of thinking about it and the way that it's working, but it's been working fine.
So I know a question that folks in the building department here in San Francisco are very curious about is we do have some amendments to electrical safety standards that are specific to the urban form of San Francisco. And, is there some capacity either in the app or at NREL to make adjustments for local code amendments?
So, obviously I'm not part of the NREL, so, but I will say, yeah. So their goal, the original goal was for them to build some kind of program that could operate across the United States. And it would work for, most common residential systems. So they were trying to get the biggest bang for the buck kind of thing. And so since we've actually been testing for over a year, we've actually come up with other things like adding things, like electric service changes and battery storage has come up. But for local amendments, depending on what they are, NREL is willing to work with jurisdictions to see how they can put those in, because they have run across that already. Whether they do that in the onboarding process with the individual contractors, or have part of the printed documents that come out that may have those local specific amendments documented in. So when I was talking about that second portion, that deeper dive, that they could be printed up in that section. That's an option too, but they are working with jurisdictions to try and do that.
Yeah, and I'm just really curious because, like, I've been trying to get building departments to go all electric. We're finally going like online permitting because of COVID, and there's all these challenges. And you implement something new, and they're like, there's usually some pushback because they've been doing it the X way for the longest time. I think for both CodeCycle and what you've done in Pleasant Hill, and in Concord, I'm just curious, like, was this a huge lift to get it off the ground? Is it a huge administrative burden? I mean, it sounds like, Geoff, you were like kind of the pioneer of it. So obviously, there's not a fair comparison maybe,
Right.
but do you feel like, was it worth it? Is the investment and efficiency worth it? Are you guys getting your team? Is permit streamlining in a sense because of these technologies or these new ways of approaches?
Right. So right now it's benefiting us because we're having the savings on plan review. But I mentioned that there's two ways of doing it. We're actually going to be implementing our new permitting system. So I know other people have been talking about that. So we're actually implementing EnerGov, which should happen sometime, in the next 6 months to a year. And there's a team from EnerGov that's working with NREL to kind of match those up, so we get some savings on that end too.
So Damien,
we had one.
From the
Go ahead, please. Sorry.
perspective, I felt like during the pandemic and the, shelter in place, all of those concerns, it was very helpful to have the type of tools that we've built, because it's easy for jurisdictions to start using an application like CodeCycle because it can all be done seamlessly over the web, and we're very fortunate to live in the time we live in where we can do things like this Zoom call. But I think it makes it easy for jurisdictions too, because I feel like a typical jurisdiction can be up and using our tool in about 15 minutes, and maybe
Wow.
30 the max. But I feel like it's very intuitive, and Chris can weigh in on that. But I don't think it was a lot of lift for Concord to start using our tool.
Yeah, Chris, it's in terms of efficiency, same question kind of for Geoff. Like, I'm just trying to get at, like, do you feel like your staff, things are a little bit more efficient now that you've implemented CodeCycle for your commercial projects, or?
Yeah, it saved us a lot of, the time has been saved on the plan review side. I mean, ultimately, we're still tracking it. There's still comments potentially on jobs. So it's not saving any time from that end, but the time saving is the plan check. And the time savings for an inspector in the field is we ultimately don't have time to check everything in the field on energy, right? We're relying on our third-party inspectors for that. So for them to have a tool that they can go around and check, some important things, the big ticket items, that's a good way of doing it. It keeps people focused, and then it allows them to spend some time, but not get hung up in the weeds, because ultimately, as we all know, our inspectors don't have all day to walk through one building. And that's just the reality of staffing needs, and I'm sure other jurisdictions are in the same boat. So we rely on third party, and this tool helps us to focus on important things. But from a just tracking side, that's really the same. We were doing that anyways, doing plan checks. So the plan check's coming from a third party, if you will. It's no cost to the applicant. So most applicants are, I wouldn't say there's any pushback from them, because it's not costing them anything. In some cases, it's probably saving them time now that it fills out the forms for them. I mean, ultimately, they don't have to sit there and manually fill out a form at their office anymore. So I think the initial users getting savings too. So we actually have quite a few designers that actually like that, and I think they probably prefer if other jurisdictions were using that too, because they've learned the tool, and it saves them time in our jurisdiction, and it's been good all around.
So Damien, so I would just say in addition to that, there's kind of a hidden savings for us too, and we can't quantify it, and that is an applicant coming in with an unsuccessful permit application that we have to turn down for whatever reason, and send them back. So we don't have that in Solar App, but we can't quantify that, right? So it's hidden, it's there. What benefit it is, it's an unknown.
And just a couple of comments for CodeCycle, I think, that I wanted to point out. One, if you're a building department and you're interested in using the CodeCycle application, you just need to call or email me directly, and we can see what we can do to fit your jurisdiction in. And then for designers that might be on the call today that see this tool and would like to use the tool, they can just go to our webpage at codecycle.org. And in the top right corner of that page, they can click the login. And then at that new screen, they can just say request an invitation, and they can be linked up to use the tool. So building departments are separate than designers. Designers can just start using the tool. It's free. And we just link them up with the online app. And then building departments need a little bit of conversation with us about the onboarding process, and free to them as well.
Great. Barry, was there some additional questions we had?
There was an interesting question, maybe to speculate, Geoff. Do you see Solar App expanding to beyond residential, or do you think that's feasible, such as to school?
Yeah. So So the whole focus was to get to get what the bulk of solar, the most common ones. They do have ideas about potentially going beyond that. So right now they're looking into storage, and like I say, we're adding things like electric service changes. But as far as like expanding into other things, actually solar app, well, let's just say NREL, when they started out to make this program, their intention was not to be in the app business. As part of the federal government, their whole purpose was to build this thing and then hand it off to some entity that would then run it and take it forward. And so they recently, excuse me, signed up with UL. And so UL will be taking that over in, I believe it's 2023. So when the next CodeCycle swings by, NREL will no longer be the entity that runs Solar App, it'll be UL. And I don't have any direction on what they're thinking about, but I'm sure they'll be thinking about expanding it beyond its current format.
I think there's a fascinating question in the chat. So since we're at the end, we'll break our protocol here and accept a question in the chat. So Chris, maybe you could lead off. Have you encountered a circumstance where it might have been, you found it valuable to be able to exert your professional expertise and maybe overrule the support you're getting from CodeCycle? Like, have you encountered something that's complex enough that was necessary?
No, I mean, ultimately lighting, even though it's complex, it's still boiled down to nuts and bolts. If you put them in the right places, it works. So I haven't had something where I've had to interpret it. It's just the fact that the tool puts all the pieces together, or helps put the pieces together. The designer ultimately is using the tool to do that. But no, I haven't had to. It's not like a building code question where it might relate to a path of travel. It's if you do X, Y, and Z, it's compliant, which is kind of what the energy forms are set up for anyway. So we haven't had to worry about that.
Geoff, do you want to comment? I mean, what happens if a project is complicated enough to need some professional discretion from a human being?
Yeah, so we haven't run into that either. So everything that when we've gone out onto the projects, because we're a smaller jurisdiction, and we've done, I want to say, like 25 solar app permits. So we're not don't have a lot of data, but we haven't had any issues so far. But having said that, all the contractors that were part of the pilot program all volunteered to be a part of the program, and so they would. NREL was collecting data on the installations. So so going forward, we would assume that a participating contractor would want to do things the right way. But currently, we have not experienced, anything where somebody's done something completely different than what they inputted.
Well,
could you remind us what the maximum size PV system Solar Apps is currently designed to accommodate?
Actually, yeah, they currently they don't have a limit. When they first designed it, they did, and then they've kind of gone beyond that. So there's no limit. It has to be residential though, and not ground mount. Sorry, and not ground mount. It's roof. It's roof mounted solar.
Fair enough. Damien, this fantastic panel's exhausted all the questions I had. Do you want to bring us home?
Sure. No, I think it's been really fantastic to have both CodeCycle and Chris from Concord, who's a CodeCycle user, kind of be here to kind of tell us their story, and Geoff, your expertise on Solar App and your experience on these different ways that we can do stuff maybe a little bit more efficiently. And now that a lot of building departments are doing online permitting so much. So I just really appreciate everyone. And this is not just for this panel, but for all of the panelists we had that we had today. We want to thank you for your time. And I want to thank everyone for attending today's forum. And hopefully it was informative, and I really appreciate it. And if you could please make sure you take our survey, please complete our online survey. I think they're going to put that in the chat too. So really appreciate it. And thank you very much, everyone.
We'll see you in a few months.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Let me note to folks also that we are giving away we are raffling off a solar phone charger to everyone who completes, well, not to everyone, but everyone who completes the survey will be entered into a raffle to win the solar phone charger. So we really, really do want to get your responses and your help to make these forums more useful as we go forward. So please, it only takes a couple minutes. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.